The moon hung low over the dense canopy of trees, casting an eerie silver glow across the quiet expanse of wilderness. Deep within the heart of Nelspruit, where the echoes of civilization faded into nothingness, a sense of unease festered in the stillness. The air was thick, almost oppressive, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. 5 teenagers, Cameron, Ethan, Jason, Mia, and Brooke, were blissfully unaware of the danger lurking in the shadows. They had come to this remote area to celebrate the end of their school years, eager to leave behind the monotony of textbooks and exams. The camping trip was meant to be a final hurrah, a last grasp at the carefree days of their youth before the realities of adulthood set in. But the forest had other plans for them. The sun was setting as the group arrived at their campsite, a small clearing surrounded by towering trees. It had taken them hours to reach the secluded spot, a location recommended by Jason, who had a penchant for exploring the unknown. The idea of camping far from the main roads, away from other tourists, thrilled him. "This place is perfect," Jason said, surveying the area with a grin. "No one to bother us out here." Mia, who was Jason's girlfriend, nodded in agreement as she unloaded the gear from the car. "It's so peaceful, just us and nature." Brooke, who was dating Ethan, looked around nervously. "Yeah, but it's kind of isolated, don't you think?" Ethan put an arm around her shoulders, reassuring her with a smile. "That's the point, babe. We've got the whole place to ourselves." Cameron, the only single one in the group, chuckled as he set up the tents. "Relax, Brooke. What could possibly go wrong?" As the evening wore on, they settled in around a campfire, roasting marshmallows and telling stories. The sky above was clear, revealing a blanket of stars. The laughter and chatter of the group echoed through the trees, a stark contrast to the silence that actually surrounded them. But as the night grew darker, that silence became oppressive. A cold wind swept through the campsite, causing the flames to flicker. "What was that?" Brooke asked. Her voice was completely trembling. "Just the wind," Ethan replied, though his eyes scanned the forest beyond the firelight. The first sign that something was wrong came in the form of a distant, unearthly hum. It was low at first, barely audible, but it grew louder with each passing minute. The sound was unlike anything they had heard, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to seep into their bones. "Do you guys hear that?" Mia asked, her eyes wide with fear. "Yeah. What is it?" Cameron replied, standing up to peer into the darkness. None of them had an answer. The hum grew louder, and then, without warning, it stopped. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the noise had been. "I don't like this," Brooke whispered, clutching Ethan's arms. "Maybe we should leave." But leaving wasn't an option. As they debated their next move, strange lights appeared in the distance, hovering just above the treetops. The lights were bright, almost blinding, and they moved in patterns that defied logic, zigzagging across the sky before disappearing as suddenly as they had appeared. "What the hell was that?" Jason exclaimed, his bravado fading as fear took hold. No one had an answer. The group huddled closer together, the sense of dread growing within each passing second. And then, screaming started. It was Mia who screamed first. She had been standing closest to the edge of the clearing, when something unseen yanked her into the darkness. Her scream was cut short, replaced by a sickening silence that chilled the others to the core. "Mia!" Jason shouted, running towards the spot where she had disappeared. But there was nothing there. No sign of a struggle, no footprints, nothing to indicate where she had gone. The others followed, their flashlights cutting through the night, but they found only darkness and more of that unsettling silence. "She's gone," Brooke said, her voice barely a whisper. "No, she can't be," Jason muttered, his hands shaking. "We need to find her." They searched for hours, calling out Mia's name until their voices were hoarse, but she was nowhere to be found. The forest seemed to swallow their words, mocking their futile efforts. And as dawn approached, they returned to the campsite, exhausted and terrified. The fire had long since died out, and the clearing was bathed in the pale light of morning. But the relief that daylight should have brought was nowhere to be found. "Where could she have gone?" Cameron asked, more to himself than to the others. Jason sat down heavily on a log, burying his face in his hands. "This doesn't make any sense. 1 minute she was there, and then next..." Brooke sat down beside him, trying to offer some comfort. She was just as scared. "Maybe we should go to the police." Ethan nodded, though he didn't seem convinced. "Yeah, maybe." But even as they spoke, the strange feeling that had settled over them the night before returned. The air grew cold, and the same hum began to reverberate through the ground, rising in intensity. "Not again," Cameron whispered, looking around frantically. Before anyone could react, the lights returned. This time, they were closer, hovering just above the treetops, casting an unnatural glow over the clearing. "We need to get out of here," Brooke screamed, grabbing Ethan's hand. But it was too late. The lights descended upon them with blinding speed, engulfing the campsite in a brilliant white flash. And when the lights faded, Ethan was now gone. Brooke's scream echoed through the forest as she fell to her knees, staring at the spot where Ethan had been standing. One moment he had been there, holding her hand, and the next he was gone, taken by the same force that had claimed Mia. Cameron pulled Brooke to her feet, his own fear barely contained. "We have to go, now." "What about Jason?" Brooke asked, and her voice was trembling. Jason was standing at the edge of the clearing, staring into the trees with a vacant expression. He had seen the lights up close, seen the way they had moved, and something in his mind had broken. "Jason?" Cameron called out, but Jason didn't respond. He just stood there, unmoving, as if in a trance. Cameron grabbed Brooke's arms, and they ran, leaving Jason behind. They didn't know where they were going, and only that they had to get as far away from the campsite as possible. The trees closed in around them, and the darkness seemed to thicken with every step. But no matter how far they ran, the hum followed them, growing louder and louder until it was all they could hear. The lights appeared again, darting between the trees, always just out of reach but never far behind. "We're not going to make it," Brooke sobbed, tears streaming down her face. Cameron didn't respond. He knew she was right. The lights were getting closer, the hum louder, and there was no escape. And then, without warning, Brooke was ripped from his side. Cameron skidded to a stop, turning around just in time to see her vanish into the darkness, her scream echoing in his ears. "Brooke!" he shouted, but there was no answer. He was alone. Cameron staggered through the forest, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He was the last one left. Mia, Ethan, Jason and Brooke were all gone, taken by some force he couldn't understand. The lights, the hum, the strange feeling in the air, it all pointed to something beyond his comprehension, something otherworldly. He collapsed against a tree, his body trembling with exhaustion and fear. The lights were still out there, hovering in the distance, watching him. He could feel their gaze, cold and unfeeling, as if they were studying him, waiting for the right moment just to strike. "What do you want?" he shouted into the night, his voice breaking. There was no answer, only the relentless hum that seemed to vibrate through his very soul. The lights moved closer, circling him like vultures. He knew his time was running out. And with a final burst of strength, Cameron pushed himself to his feet and stumbled forward. He had no plan, no destination, only the desperate need to keep moving. But the forest seemed endless, the trees stretching out in every direction like a maze with no exit. And then, just as he was about to give up, he saw it, a clearing up ahead. Bathed in the glow of the rising sun, he ran toward it. His heart was pounding in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, he could make it out alive. But as he reached the edge of the clearing, he froze. In the center of the clearing stood a massive object, unlike anything he had ever seen. It was a towering structure, sleek and metallic, its surface shimmering with otherworldly light. The hum emanated from it, vibrating through the ground beneath his feet. Cameron's mind struggled to comprehend what he was seeing. It was a ship, a craft of some kind, something that didn't belong on this earth. And he knew in that moment that this was the source of everything. The lights, the hum, the disappearances. He was so close, and yet paralyzed by fear. As if sensing his presence, the ship began to glow brighter. The hum grew louder, more intense, until it was all he could hear. The lights began blinding, and Cameron shielded his eyes, his body trembling with fear. And then, just as suddenly as it all started, the light faded. The hum stopped, and the ship vanished, leaving nothing but an empty clearing behind. Cameron collapsed to the ground, his mind reeling. He was alive, but he knew the others were gone, taken by the ship, by whatever was inside, and he was left with the knowledge that he had seen something no one would have ever believed, something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The search parties never found any trace of Mia, Ethan, Jason, or even Brooke. Their disappearance remained a mystery, a cold case that would never be solved. Cameron was the only one who returned from that ill-fated trip, but he was never the same. He had never spoken of what he had seen, not to the police, not to his family. But the nightmares never stopped. Every night, he would see the lights, hear the hum, and feel the cold, unfeeling gaze of something not of this world. And he knew deep down that they were still out there, watching, waiting. One day they would return, and when they did, there would be no escape. The forest in Nelspruit remained quiet, undisturbed by human presence. But if you listen closely, late at night, you might hear it, a low resonant hum, and see the faint glow of lights in the distance, a reminder of those who vanished and were never seen again. This story has changed the way I think of camping trips now. The story that was told and passed on to me through two different sources. both independent, both void of any connection to them. However, one thing remains. The story is true. The names, different. The actual location within Nelspruit, undisclosed for reasons to protect those that would dare venture into those woods to try and encounter the spirits of the last departed ones, or encounter the otherworldly aliens, or whatever you want to call them. This serves as a reminder that there are things in this world we cannot explain, and as wild as they may seem, they are true. They are true to the point that the person that experienced them has now had their lives changed for good. This is the Creepy and Paranormal Show, and I hope you've enjoyed this retelling of an encounter that happened in the forests of Nelspruit.